Madness is on. It's Raw Takes with Andrew Hody. Like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoy this video. And make sure to check out more content from Raw Takes on social media. All the links are in the description below. We're on Facebook, we're on X, and we're on Instagram. Hope everyone's having a wonderful day. If your bracket is still standing and you're watching this video, I want to give you a round of applause. As I'm recording this video, I want to let you know a lot of Game 2's games have not happened yet. So Game 1 is going to be kind of the reflection for right now. As this video is being recorded, all the number 1 seeds are still standing. So I just want to emphasize that as well. We still have a huge weekend to get into. And on Tuesday, we'll talk about all those games as we get into the round of 16 and round of 8. However, for right now, we'll focus on the games that we had yesterday. We'll also talk a little bit about the Cavs, the NBA, Oklahoma City now getting the best record overall, and Golden State with a Steph Curry injury last night in the game against Toronto. We'll get to those headlines in a little bit as well. And we'll briefly talk about some NFL headlines as well. The Browns positioning in the draft and a little bit about Deshaun Watson. We'll keep it a little bit here locally in Cleveland, but then we'll discuss some of those other positions in the draft. We'll get right all to it, but let's start off with what the story is, and that's March Madness. You look at some of the games yesterday in your brackets, and you look at today's slate. As I'm recording this, there's a lot of big games that are still yet to be played. So you have St. Mary's and Vanderbilt at 7 and 10. Duke taking on Mount St. Mary's. It's another number 1 seed. As I'm recording this, Duke has not lost yet or won yet. So that game's at 2:50 this afternoon. Memphis taking on Colorado State. I talked with Jake Nalencic. Thank you for Jake joining us the other day. He discussed a little bit about some of those upset teams he may look at, and I know I told him Colorado State. So thanks to Jake again. He's a college basketball expert. Definitely knows a lot more about college basketball than I do. But, you know, when you look at some of these slated games that took place yesterday, like Drake taking down Missouri, that was a big upset, 11 over 6. How about a school like Clemson getting upset yesterday? And that was by McNeese State. So you have to take a look at some of those upsets and say, wow, can't believe that happened, as the bracket really gets down to the nitty-gritty. Michigan got off to an 11-0 lead, I know, to the dismay of Ohio State fans. But they took down UC San Diego, who made it a really good game at the end. It was 68-65. I'm looking at the rest of this bracket here. You take a look at Creighton beating Louisville 89-75. You take a look at BYU and Wisconsin now going to face off. Wisconsin easily handling Montana. BYU easily handling BC. Well, not easily. It was a 9-point game, but that game was relatively kind of taken away by the second half by BYU. You look at some of these other schools like McNeese taking down Clemson. I mean, there is a lot to get to when it comes to I said McNeese State earlier, by the way. I meant McNeese. But there's a lot more games to get to today, and you look at the number 1 seeds. I mean, Houston just took down SIUE yesterday. Houston, they look like probably the best team as of yesterday, and a lot of people think they're overrated. Are they overrated? We'll have to see as the tournament still commences, but they absolutely ate SIUE for breakfast, lunch, and dinner in a 38-point victory. And then you look at some of these other games that took place yesterday, like Arkansas over Kansas. There's talks about if Bill Self now needs to be on the hot seat. I don't think so. Bill Self is still a 2-time NCAA tournament champion. And Kansas has been such a stellar program with his leadership. Do you want to move off a guy like that that's already brought you so much success? I know the gun's probably going to be under the radar for Kansas now because they may need to make a move on what the heck to do with their program with some of these losses that have taken place in the first round. But having said that, I don't think Bill Self should be the culprit in the mess that has been the Kansas Jayhawks coming off at least the last couple seasons in particular. He's still a 2-time NCAA champion, and I think he deserves a lot of credit for that. And he's put Kansas in a great position to win championships year after year after year. So I don't think that is the problem at all when it comes to the Kansas Jayhawks. But John Calipari's Arkansas squad absolutely getting the upset there as a 10 over a 7. Louisville, obviously them falling to Creighton was a big deal as well. A lot of people had Louisville making a little bit further than they did. UConn's still in as of we talk now. That was kind of my Cinderella-esque team just because they've won it the last 2 years in a row. There's still a lot of madness to get to when it comes to the bracket, but I'll tell you what, it's just kind of gotten started. I mean, yesterday was nuts. There was a lot of nutty games yesterday. I think a lot of people even thought Clemson was going to go a little bit of the distance, but maybe the SEC, just like in football, isn't as great as basketball as we all think. Tennessee, though, they took care of some business yesterday when it came to Wofford. So Tennessee getting another win out of the SEC. But you look at a team like the so many games. I'm just losing my train of thought here. But you look at a team like Clemson. Clemson. Back to Clemson. You look at a team like Clemson falling to McNeese yesterday. That was a tough one. And Clemson wasn't one of the top ranked schools. 12 upsets over 5 are probably more common than expected. But that was definitely something to be seen as the madness is really getting going. But I will say this. I want to go back to Arkansas and Kansas for a minute and just talk about John Calipari's presser after the game. He just was a quote machine. He was like, I don't care. We won after that game. And John Calipari had some rough years at Kentucky, now building a new program with Arkansas. He is a champion too. But having said that, I don't care we won. That's the right attitude to have, and the players seem to kind of have that I don't care we won attitude after they win games. And that's a good thing. But if you're Arkansas, you're still one of the lower seeds. You still got a long way to go. But is that a possible Cinderella story in the making? It's possible. You look at St. John's handling Omaha yesterday, and Omaha came off to an early lead, and then it was a 30-point blowout. So that game at the very beginning was very interesting to see because Omaha got off to a quick lead, a small lead. It was only like 2 or 3 by the first half. I think we were like 6 or 7 minutes in. But then St. John's just came down with a cavalanche, I guess I should say. Well, not a cavalanche if we're talking about the Cavaliers, but an avalanche of points at the end of that game, and they won it by 30. And I still think St. John's being as good as they were, they're obviously a top contender to probably win the whole darn thing. But you look at what Houston was able to do against SIAE yesterday. 38 points, another avalanche there. That was the 2 massive victories in the tournament, and obviously 2 teams I don't think you want to run into. Now, here in Cleveland, we are going to be having some tournament games coming up over the weekend. That's going to be exciting. There's some big games and big names that are going to be in town, and that's going to be exciting for the city. But I'll tell you what, this madness is really only getting started, and there's still a whole slate of games to go in the first round, and then we get to the round of 32. How many perfect brackets are going to be remaining? I think it's now officially less than 1%, or a couple hundred, I think, out of all the brackets that were made. I actually didn't get my bracket in on time, so I'm not even including my bracket into the mix here, but yeah, I wouldn't have had a perfect bracket even if I was able to complete it on time. There is still craziness that's probably going to happen in the second round, and that's what this tournament's all about. You just never know what the hell is going to happen. In the first and second round, your brackets are pretty much already busted as is. Imagine if it was just 16 teams that made the tournament as opposed to 64. Wouldn't that be a little bit more chaotic? I mean, it would be a little more straightforward, but it's a lot more chaotic with a 64-team bracket. I can't even think. There's like so many combinations it could be. I don't even know the exact amount. It's a ton. I think it's like in the quintillions. It's a large amount. That's how many combinations you can have of a bracket when it comes to the NCAA tournament. So that is just nuts. But there's still a long way to go this year in March Madness, and we'll be there every step of the way talking about it here on Raw Takes. I have a buddy of mine, Jerome Petikauskas. He's actually coming on to talk about baseball next week as we have the opening week of baseball on Thursday. So about 5 to 6 days, depending on when you're watching this video, the opening day of baseball will take place. Jerome will be joining the show on Tuesday. He's going to give all the rundown with me on all 30 teams. We're going to discuss that. We might have a few more guests on the show to talk some baseball, but that's still TBD. But Jerome will give the rundown on everything Major League Baseball. We'll talk about all 30 teams, our predictions and standings, and we'll get into all the nitty-gritty talk when it comes to pitching, when it comes to bullpens, when it talks to orders, batting orders, the outfield, the infield, the Guardians, the Yankees. The Yankees might have a mess of a season from what it looks like. Is the AL as wide open as everyone thinks? There's a lot to get to when it comes to baseball. We're going to talk about that all on Tuesday's show right here on Raw Takes. Jerome Petikauskas will be joining. Make sure to check out his podcast as well with Kevin Shakru. They are locked in on Cleveland sports. They have a podcast as well, so make sure to check that out. We've pitched it here on the show numerous times, but it's the Cleveland sports realm. Make sure to check that out wherever you get your podcast. Jerome and Kevin do a great job, and they do some great reels as well. So make sure to check them out. Jerome will be on the show next week, and we'll talk all baseball. But he's also got some insight on some of the tournament games as well. I'm going to ask him a few questions on that. It's going to be a heavy baseball show on Tuesday, but we're not going to neglect the tournament. We'll have a lot to get to when it comes to March Madness as we get on to Tuesday's show. Let's get on to some of the other headlines going on right now. The Cleveland Cavaliers in particular losing 3 games in a row. And are you concerned about the Cavs? I would say if it was just these 2 West Coast losses, I wouldn't be as concerned about the Cavs. But that game on Sunday, I was watching it over at the family's house, and I'll tell you what, they were up 60 to 47 against the Orlando Magic. DeAndre Hunter doing this, ice in his veins, Donovan Mitchell doing the same thing as the first half was essentially just a Cavs show. And then they let Paolo Banchero and the Magic walk all over them in the second half. And it was just completely unfolded. You mean to tell me that team's going to beat the Boston Celtics? The way they collapsed against the Orlando Magic, and I mean they collapsed. They had no business losing that game whatsoever. I can forgive the Clippers loss and the Kings loss. I really, really can. Because when you're going on a West Coast trip and it's late in the season, you've already won 50-plus games. Those two losses, to me, they're excusable. But that Orlando loss pisses me off. And I'm just honest. I'm just being honest. It pisses me off. And I know there's a lot of people saying don't overreact. You can't lose a game where you're up 13 at the half to a bad team like the Magic. At least the Kings somewhat had control of that game the whole way through. At least the Clippers really had control with Zubac playing as well as he did. Oh, man, did he eat the Cavs for lunch. And, yeah, those are concerning, and I get it. The Cavs shouldn't have lost those games. You're obviously resting certain guys. Evan Mobley not being on the floor for Orlando may have been a downside. Obviously, no Darius Garland against Sacramento. So, obviously, there's some flaws there when you're not playing all your guys. But, granted, what are you doing? Even without Evan Mobley, the Cavs are a much better team than the Orlando Magic. Evan Mobley didn't have his best stuff last year, and you beat the Orlando Magic in a 7-game series. Granted, it was just a 7-game series that went 7 games, and the Cavs were not nearly as good last year as they were this year, but you can't lose a game like that to the Orlando Magic by 5. That's absolutely insane. So, yeah, that loss really pisses me off, and it stings me the wrong way. If I'm the Cleveland Cavaliers, you got to look back on that specific game, I think. Of all 13 losses now that the Cavs have had this season, there's one loss that sticks out like a sore thumb to me, and it's not the Celtic games. Not at all. It's that Orlando Magic game. If the Cavs end up losing to the Boston Celtics or if they get bounced early, which I don't think is going to happen because you're likely to play who in the second round, Indiana or maybe Detroit if Detroit catches up to Milwaukee, because Milwaukee's a disaster. It looked like Milwaukee probably was going to be the 4 seed, but they've been slipping as of late. So if it's not Milwaukee, which it doesn't look like it may be at this point, it might be Indiana or Detroit. You have no business losing a series against either one of those teams. Maybe it's a JV revenge series. I don't know if it ends up being Detroit, but if it's Indiana, Detroit, or Milwaukee, any one of those 3 teams, I mean, I think you're going to beat them if you're the Cavs. So I think they're going to go to the Eastern Conference Finals. Having said that, though, if you end up losing to the Celtics in 6 or 7 games, or 5 games even, I'm going to look back on this Orlando Magic loss. That was pathetic. And the Orlando Magic are probably going to be your opponent in the first round, or at least likely to be, depending on how the play-in tournament goes. Orlando's currently the 8th seed. So that makes me a little nervous going into a first-round playoff series that you lost a game to them like that. You were up 13 at the half, and you had every reason to close out that game, opportunities to close out that game, and you let Paolo Banchero, Franz Wagner, and the Orlando Magic just go off. I don't know how you do that. If you're the Cavs, that's the loss I'm going to look back on if things go south in the playoffs. That was pathetic. I still think the Cavs, they're at least going to get to the Eastern Conference Finals, but that was a pathetic loss. Out of all 3 losses, that's the one that really infuriates me. Because you were about to go on a West Coast trip. I get it. You won 16 straight. A lot of the time, you're just going through the motions. There's the attitude of, can we just get to the playoffs? There's some people that think the NBA regular season's too long. I think it's perfect. I think the whole load management thing is stupid because we need to see guys like Darius Garland play and Evan Mobley play. We don't want to see rest for all these guys every other day. Fans are paying good money to see these guys play, and you're going to rest them? I mean, please. Obviously, that could all be tweaked and worked on. You can shrink the NBA season maybe to 62 games, and that's fine. If you're going to play everybody, I think that's worth it. I don't think you can go much more than that. I don't think you can shrink it. Maybe even if you go to 40 games, I think that's still too small. But you know what? 82 games, that's not bad. Players used to play 82 games all the time. I don't see any reason players can't now. We can go down the whole load management crap in a minute. Right now, NBA, though, is taking a back seat as we have March Madness to worry about going into this weekend. But still, that Orlando Magic game is going to stick out like a sore thumb. Steph Curry went down in that game yesterday against the Toronto Raptors. The Golden State Warriors have been hot as of late. I made a whole video about how I'm sick of both the Lakers and the Warriors, and I really don't care for either one of them right now. Having said that, though, when it looks like the Toronto Raptors, even though they had that injury, the Warriors still were able to come out of that one easily. Draymond Green leading with 21 points. Steph Curry, an unfortunate injury for him. Hopefully he's doing okay. I don't know how much time as I'm recording this, if he is going to miss any time. He is going to undergo an MRI. I'm looking at the report now. I just want to be sure. On Thursday, and it prevented him from returning to the game, of course. So that is according to Mark J. Spears of ESPN.com. So hopefully Steph Curry is a lot healthier, and obviously injury is a big factor for Golden State, and hopefully he gets back to a speedy recovery. Having said that, though, I'm still sick of the Golden State Warriors, and it's not just Steph Curry. And as I said, you always wish for good health. I want to emphasize that. So hopefully Steph Curry gets back to the court as soon as he can. But having said that, too, I'm sick of Draymond Green. I'm sick of Jimmy Butler now being on the Warriors. I'm just sick of this team. And Toronto being bad probably helped Golden State win that game, too, despite Steph Curry's injury. But having said that, that's a tough situation. If Steph Curry's not going to play for a good sample size, I think the regular season might become a wash at this point for Golden State. I think they're going to make the playoffs anyway when you look at the teams that are behind them. The only real threat of them going maybe back to the play-in would be the T-Wolves. I don't see the Dallas Mavericks trending towards an upward direction, and they're in the play-in right now. So, yeah, I think the T-Wolves might be the biggest threat right now. Are they going to sneak into the top 5? I don't think so, especially probably without Steph Curry. Denver losing to LA the other night, is that a significant loss? I still think the Denver Nuggets are a much better team than the Lakers, and I would take them all day in a 7-game series. So I'm not so worried about that when it comes to the Denver Nuggets. The Lakers are still kind of riding high in the Western Conference, but at the end of the day, none of them are Oklahoma City right now. Oklahoma City has the best record in the NBA for a reason. They, I think, right now are pretty much the most unstoppable force. We'll see how it pans out in the postseason, but right now on paper, if I were to pick who the NBA champion would be, I would really only have 3 teams in contention for it. And there's one team I wouldn't even necessarily put as the top 2 contending teams. I'll start off with Oklahoma City being the first, because they have the best overall player of these 3 teams. And the reason they do is because SGA is not just the MVP candidate, he just is unstoppable and unguardable. Who's been able to stop this guy all season long? He has 54-point games at times in losses, this season. And despite that, it looks like the Thunder are going to win 60-plus games anyway. So, props to the Oklahoma City Thunder. I think that's going to be the toughest out for anybody in a 7-game series. So, for me, I'm going to say the highest odds, I'm going to put them at 50% to win the NBA championship. Of the top 3 teams that I think can, I would give that to Oklahoma City. I'm going to go 30% for the next team, and that's the Boston Celtics to win the title. And the third team is the Cleveland Cavaliers, and I've already explained that as much, but I'm putting them at 20% out of these top 3. The reason I put the Boston Celtics there is because obviously they're the defending champs. The Cavs still have a lot to prove when it comes to the Boston Celtics. They have to beat them in a 7-game series, and there's still question marks if they're able to do so. And if Donovan's going to be the guy for that, or could it be Evan Mobley, that's still yet to be seen. Despite some of their playoff experience, Donovan's still 3-7 in playoff series. This is the defending NBA champion. Even though I think Oklahoma City right now has the best player, Boston probably as a unit is the best team. Oklahoma City can do a lot of what Boston does. They have a good bench. They have a good big man in Chet Holmgren. They have good players like Lou Dort and Jalen Williams and all them. Like they have such a good squad. So for me to just say that Oklahoma City, they haven't won a championship. So I guess I should. Maybe Boston deserves a little bit more limelight for that. But to me, in terms of roster construction, I haven't seen anyone stop Oklahoma City at a good pace all season long, especially in the Western Conference. Right now, Oklahoma City looks miles away compared to everybody else in the West. I would say maybe a Denver, because Denver has such a superstar player, Nikola Jokic. But are we getting to a point where SGA could possibly overtake Jokic as the best player in the Western Conference? I think it's possible. I think he could overtake Luka. I do too. And I think those are 2 really good NBA players who are definitely more established. But SGA right now, at least of my top 3 NBA teams, is the best player in the NBA. He's unguardable. No one stopped him all season long. So in a 7-game series, I would have to pick Oklahoma City against everybody right now. They still have a lot to prove in the playoffs. But from what I've seen in the regular season and from what I can see Shai Gilgeous-Alexander do, I think that's all going to translate to the postseason. And now they have more postseason experience and probably the ability to beat teams that have Luka Doncic on them, like the Dallas Mavericks did last year. I think they could beat the Los Angeles Lakers easily in a 7-game series. That series probably goes 5 games, in all honesty. So Oklahoma City is my 1. Boston, I put at 30%. I'll put OKC at 50, Boston at 30. Because they've been there, done it before, we know how well coached they are. We know they have great bench pieces. They have the Peyton Pritchards of the world, the Derek Whites, the Al Horfords. You have a guy like Kristaps Porzingis now in your starting lineup consistently on a basis. You have Jaylen Brown. We know what he can do. We obviously know the superstar Jason Tatum is. that team is built so well and coached very well under Joe Mazzulla. It's going to be hard probably for anybody in the East to overtake that. The Celtics right now are definitely the second most likely of those top three teams. And then at 20%, I put the Cleveland Cavaliers. And the reason I put them at 20% is not just because of that loss to Orlando, but just because I still have to see it from Donovan Mitchell. As great as he is, as big of a superstar as he is, and as much as I like him, I don't necessarily know if he's going to be the guy that leads you to a finals. I think he needs to be on a roster with a guy that can lead you to the finals. Could it be Evan Mobley that does that? I think it could be, but that still remains yet to be seen. Evan Mobley, I think, has the potential to be as good as a guy like Tim Duncan was. I think Evan Mobley's got a really high ceiling. He could be, at one point, talked about like SGA or Nikola Jokic at his positioning, one of the best in the NBA. I really believe that when it comes to Evan Mobley. So down the line, I think Evan Mobley could absolutely be a guy talked about in the NBA, built to be one of the best. And he's on his way to it. But I don't think that is this year. Even though I think the Cavs offensively are a juggernaut, and I think Kenny Atkinson's been able to unlock that potential, there's still a lot of work to do. And I think for the Cleveland Cavaliers, this year may be another test in the postseason. It may be, let's get to the Eastern Conference Finals, and you lose to the Celtics in 6 or 7 games, or even 5 games, honestly. And it comes back to losses like that Orlando game, where you just kind of punch yourself wondering, like, that's why you need to have concerns about the Cavs. Or even that loss to the Houston Rockets, where they did come back, but they weren't able to overcome the Houston Rockets, who are a young and upcoming team as well. I mean, those little things, you look at all these flaws in the course of an NBA regular season, we certainly see it from past championships. When you look at the 73-9 Warriors, for example, despite how good that team was in the regular season, they didn't win it all. They lost to the Cavs in 7 games. The Cleveland Cavaliers were the better team. And we saw a lot of flaws in the regular season that year from the Cleveland Cavaliers and the LeBron James, Kevin Love, Kyrie Irving era. There was a ton of flaws that season. They lost 25 games in the regular season that year, too. So we see those flaws, but then we saw it executed so much different when it came to the NBA Finals. Like the Cavs were able to overcome almost all of it. So for me, that's why I'm not so sure I'm going to trust the Cleveland Cavaliers right away. They're still kind of young and new to this postseason thing. And at the end of the day, Donovan Mitchell, even as good as he is, he's 3-7 in playoff series. And he's never been to a conference finals in either conference. So I don't know if I could buy into that right away. And in the semi-conference final series we've seen, the semifinal series, he was not necessarily in good positioning. They lost to the Clippers that one year as a 1 seed in Utah with a mix of Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell that won you a lot of regular season games but couldn't compete in the postseason with a team like the Clippers. They lost that in 6 games. Obviously, last year to the Magic, they lost that in 7 games. So, and then you look at the Denver Nuggets series where they were up 3-1, and then Donovan Mitchell kind of locked in 2020, and the Denver Nuggets would overcome a 3-1 deficit. So, to me, I haven't seen Donovan Mitchell really take the next step. In the next series, he locked into. Donovan Mitchell was not very good in that series. He had one good game, but no, he locked down. It was an ugly situation. So I still haven't seen it from Donovan Mitchell where I could believe he could win playoff series consistently. So for me to say the Cavs could just go to the finals, I'm not really to jump on the gun yet. We've seen that Donovan Mitchell could put together great regular seasons. Is Evan Mobley going to be that guy that could really be kind of the new Superman to the Robin kind of thing? I think that remains yet to be seen. I think they need another year of postseason experience in order to unlock that potential. So no, I wouldn't say the Cavs win the finals this year. But out of the 3 teams that I think can win the finals this year, the Cavs would be my third. It's just because they do have an answer for so much. But right now, it's been a little bit of a struggle. But I think they can recover. Let's move on to some football, and then we'll wrap up Raw Takes for today. You can get back to enjoying some March Madness, and we'll talk about all that on Tuesday, along with opening day of baseball with my buddy Jerome. I want to talk a little bit about some of these Deshaun Watson headlines happening in town. Deshaun Watson obviously getting engaged. Congratulations to him. I mean, obviously, I don't want to see Deshaun Watson take another snap with the Browns, but personal life, glad things are going well, despite off-the-field issues, and yada, yada, yada. You wish a man well. Does not matter. So, obviously, he's getting married now, and then he's back in the Browns training facility, getting ready for the next step. The next step is going to be Deshaun Watson playing for another team, if he even gets that chance. Nothing about Deshaun Watson's attitude, nothing about what he's done off the field or on the field. And that's going back not just to his Houston days, but I'm just saying even off the field here in Cleveland. Nothing's shown true commitment to the Cleveland Browns. So he's under contract. He can use the Browns facilities. It's all fine and good. You can't really cut him. That's so much dead cap money. How are you going to pay the rest of the roster? So right now you're in a position where you're stuck with Deshaun. He's probably going to be working on playing for somebody else in the future. If you're the Browns, you cannot put him back on the field. I am closing the door on Deshaun Watson. There's some people in town that think maybe we shouldn't close the door. I'm dead serious. There is. I think nationwide, I think everyone thinks the Cleveland Browns have closed the door on Deshaun Watson. And I think most people in Cleveland think that too. But there is that possibility he could come back. I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think it can happen. The town has absolutely no love for this man whatsoever. We would have if he would have played well. If Deshaun Watson would have balled out in this trade, would have been one of the best in NFL history as opposed to one of the worst, people in Cleveland wouldn't be so pitied. But right now, no one wants to see Deshaun Watson take the field for the Cleveland Browns again. If he's doing all this training work, it's not to play with the Cleveland Browns. And I think the Browns as an organization know they can't put him back on the field. If you put Deshaun Watson back on the field in a Cleveland Browns uniform, you're essentially spitting on the fan base. The fan base wants a new era. It's clear. Now, whether that means drafting a new quarterback, I'm not so sure that's what people in town want either. Obviously, you really can't go to the Deshaun Watson route. And it doesn't look like he'd be even able to play in 2025. So you can't go that route. That route's eliminated, and that route probably never even existed to begin with at this point. The rookie quarterback situation, obviously, is this Shedeur warming up to Cleveland thing really to be taken seriously? I think it is. But do I think Shedeur Sanders should be the number 2 overall pick in this draft? I don't. I would much rather him go to a New York Giants, trade down, get some assets out of it. Maybe you go to 3 with New York and get Abdul Carter out of it if the Giants are that desperate to get a quarterback, and then you go in free agency and get a Russell Wilson or Kirk Cousins in a trade. I don't know. I do not know. I'm not sold that Shedeur Sanders is going to be a future quarterback guy. I believe Cam Ward could be. I don't think Cam Ward's skill set, though, means he'll be ready this year. I think it's going to take a year of Cam Ward to have some experience under his belt. So if you were to trade up with Tennessee to guarantee to get him, then maybe I'm in business. But you're probably going to have to give up some assets for that. At the end of the day, the Browns' biggest problem right now is a quarterback problem. And Deshaun Watson, I honestly think, doing this training video stuff, getting married and all that, and getting married's fine. That's a separate thing. That's life. People get married in life. That's a life story. Good for him. Good. But the training videos in particular, like all this deviation and distractions, it's distractions from what we saw on the field last year. We saw garbage on the field. Absolute garbage quarterback play. And I'm not using the recovering from injury excuse with this guy. We saw the worst quarterback play all decade, probably, and since the 2020s began. We saw Kevin Stefanski make it work with Baker Mayfield. He did get injured in 21. He had to move on. Obviously, probably in hindsight, the wrong move, but granted, Baker probably wasn't Kevin Stefanski's guy, but we saw Kevin make it work with Baker at times. We saw Kevin make it work with Case Keenum sometimes. In a few games, Case Keenum looked effective. We saw Kevin Stefanski make it work with Nick Mullins, even though I think we lost that game to the Raiders, but still. We saw Kevin Stefanski make it work with Joe Flacco. We've seen him make it work with P.J. Walker. We've seen him make it work with Dorian Thompson-Robinson in one Pittsburgh Steelers game. And that was a defensive game the whole way through. But still, Dorian Thompson-Robinson has a win under his Browns belt. Dorian Thompson-Robinson. Stefanski has made it work with every quarterback except Deshaun Watson. He did make it work maybe in one game with Deshaun Watson. I think it was the game against Baltimore. Yeah, that game. In the Arizona game, I didn't think Watson was that bad either. I don't think we talked about that one enough. But granted, all that's forgotten. It's 2023. It's 2025 now. It's all distractions. Deshaun Watson cannot play in a Cleveland Browns uniform again. And the idea of it sickens me. He was so bad last year that everyone, even people that defended him, like myself, not off the field issues, I defended the move. I believed he can come back and be the Houston Texans quarterback. I defended strictly the move to get him. People like me are sickened at this point for how bad he's played. You cannot put that man back on the field. It just can't happen. It cannot happen for the Cleveland Browns. I don't think they're going to. So I don't think there's any reason to have fear of that. But the idea of it sickens a lot of people in this city. A lot of Browns fans nationwide. If he's going to get another opportunity, let it be somewhere else. Not with the Cleveland Browns. It cannot happen. All right, some other NFL news going around now. There's been some other moves taking place with the Cincinnati Bengals. Now their offense is completely locked in, but we all know their defense is in shambles. There's a whole draft coming up, guys. I think we need to put the brakes on Cincinnati. It's going to be a disaster locking in their core offense. That core offense is going to win them games. It's going to win them a handful of games next season. They were 9-8 last year, even though they did struggle in 8 of those games and lost them, but they were in the playoff conversation by the end of the year. That offense is locked in and good. It's the defense that's a problem, but there's a whole draft where the Cincinnati Bengals, I think, are going to focus on drafting defensive talent. So I'm not bought into the whole nonsense that, oh, well, Cincinnati's defense this or that, it's going to cost them a chance to really compete. No. Let's just see what they do in the draft. There's still a lot of moves to be made. Is Cincinnati's defense next year going to be probably top tier in the NFL? I don't think so. I don't think it's Cleveland's defense or Pittsburgh's defense even within the division, but I think it'll be a lot better. And I think they have a whole draft to prove it. Same thing with the Baltimore Ravens. Baltimore Ravens defense wasn't that impressive last year. It was a lot better than Cincinnati's, but they weren't earth-shattering. The Cleveland Browns won a game against them, for crying out loud. So I'm not sold on the whole, Cincinnati locking in their offense means their defense is going to be terrible. I think you could turn around, guys. I really do. So I'd say pump the brakes on that. Those are good deals for Cincinnati, and those are deals that had to be made. They had to be made. You needed to lock in Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins. The chemistry is too good. We know that offensive core could get you to a Super Bowl. So could they do it again if they're all locked in? I think it's possible. What are you going to do? Get rid of all three of those guys? If you're a Cincinnati Bengal fan, do you want Joe Burrow to go play for the Miami Dolphins or the New York Jets or somewhere else in the AFC? I don't think so. Do you want T. Higgins to be a great weapon for Patrick Mahomes at Kansas City? Do you want Jamar Chase to catch passes from Jared Goff and watch the Detroit Lions win it all? I don't think so. Pump the brakes. I think Cincinnati put themselves in a lot better position here with their offense all locked in at step. They have defensive work to do. There's no doubt. I think they can figure it out, though. I think you have to lock in your offense because you got to score points to win. And there's no doubt Cincinnati can score points. They also let other teams score a lot of points. And they have a whole draft to analyze and figure it out. Got to pump the brakes on that a little bit. This is still a team we saw go to the Super Bowl in 2021 and almost go again in 2022. 2 down years. Joe Burrow was hurt in 23. 24, obviously, the defense was terrible. Having said that, things can turn around, and I think Cincinnati is on an upward trajectory. I think Baltimore kind of still stagnant at where they're at right now. They still have Lamar Jackson, but to me, something with Baltimore is going to give at some point. I really think so. And their defense isn't very efficient either. It's a lot better than Cincinnati's, but there's still a lot of work to do there. The Baltimore Ravens may figure that out as well. But right now, we're in a position with the AFC North where Cincinnati and Baltimore are offensive juggernauts. Pittsburgh and Cleveland are defensive juggernauts. So how's that going to intermix in 2025 remains yet to be seen. But the moves and pieces are starting to slowly come in place for all these groups. I think when you look at the Cleveland Browns in particular, they're definitely going to be a defensive juggernaut. If Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry are going to keep their jobs, it's going to probably be heavily reliant on Jim Schwartz's defense. I'm just being completely honest. But we'll have to see how that translates in 2025 because defensive coordinators tend to get stale over time. And I think it's possible that that could be a situation here. We don't know. There's still a lot of defensive talent on that roster. Other big stories are just really around the draft when it comes to the NFL right now. The Giants in the 3rd pick, they're probably not going to take a quarterback there because there's no other big names to do so if Cam Ward's and Shedeur are off the board. So should they trade with the Browns to get Shedeur? As a Browns fan, I wouldn't necessarily hate that because then that may guarantee us Abdul Carter. And I like Abdul Carter out of all the draft prospects the best. So part of me, or I just draft him at 2 and let New York take Shedeur at 3. You need to necessarily get more capital out of it. I'd say hell yeah. The Raiders, if they traded up, hell yeah, but it doesn't look like that's going to be the situation now that Geno Smith's there. And Pete Carroll's kind of bringing in that new era to the Las Vegas Raiders with a guy he wants at quarterback who has shown to play very well at quarterback. So Geno Smith probably going to be holding down the fort with the Las Vegas Raiders, but I still think Geno Smith's not going to be your long-term answer. The Raiders are a clown show anyway, so I'm not so sure I'm sold on anything they do. But they're a team that I would think would probably need a quarterback. Jacksonville, they don't need a quarterback. If we were to trade down with them, Jacksonville's not going to. That would just probably be to get Abdul Carter, honestly. So when it comes to making trades in the draft, the Browns stand pat. They need assets right now, so trading down is not necessarily a bad option. but a solid QB option is going to be necessary. Whether that be Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders, I don't know. I would rather it be Cam Ward. But the veteran market is personally my direction I'd go right now, and draft a quarterback maybe next year. I think Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry are strictly in we need to save jobs mode. So go get a guy who can consistently win you maybe 10 games, save your job, and get the guy you want next year. That's just me. But the Browns are in win now mode. Clearly they are because they locked in Myles Garrett. And if this is going to be a rebuild, it's got to be a retool quickly. It's literally just got to be 2024 was a disaster, and we retooled really quickly for 2025 to get back to 10-7, 9-8, and get ourselves back in the playoff conversation. Honestly, all Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry need to do next year is win 90 games, and their jobs are safe. As a Browns fan, I'm happy with that. And I'm sure everyone in town would be happy with that, based on how last year went. But there's still a long way to go before we even get to that. Enjoy the rest of the madness, everybody. That's it for today's edition of Raw Takes with Andrew Hody. We'll be back on Tuesday. It's going to be the baseball opening day preview show. We'll talk all 30 teams, how all 162 games will pan out for them. The Chicago White Sox, P.S., are going to be awful. So I'm just going to throw that out there right off the rip for my prediction on at least the Chicago White Sox. Overall record, I'll announce that on the show. Jerome Petikauskas will join me from the Cleveland Sports Realm. Have a wonderful weekend, everybody. Take it easy. Enjoy March Madness, and we'll see you next week on Raw Takes with Andrew Hody.